This morning you're in for a real treat as Haley Shotwell comes to share about some work that the Lord has been doing in her life all the way up to this very moment. And so I'm excited. I had the opportunity to sit down and have a lunch with Haley back in August or September, I think it was. And just get to know her better from just a passing hello and how you doing the time she has been to church. And I got to hear Haley's heart. I got to hear a sense of calling that the Lord has placed on her heart. And so we wanted to have an opportunity for you all as her church family to hear that. So Haley, come on up here for just a minute, and I'm going to do what I did in the first hour. Is that okay? Good. So in the first hour, what I discovered this past week is when I texted Haley's grandmother and I said, I need to know how many generations deep is Haley here at Mill Creek, and as best as she could say was 5. You are the 5th generation of your family here at Mill Creek. She represents 3 generations here even today. And so in the first hour we did a little exercise. We're going to do it again because I have a feeling it's going to look a little different. I think so too. If you are Haley's family, mom, dad, grandparent, cousin, second cousin, y'all's roots run deep around here. And so if you are Haley's family, would you just stand so that we can just see where... Wow. Yeah, oh, in the back, please. Don't sit down, because now we're going to add to it. If you were here at Mill Creek during Haley's growing up years, would you stand? Yeah, be proud. Stand. There you go. Okay. Sweet. Love to see it. Now, we're going to take it a step further because I know there's a whole nother group here this hour. If you are one of Haley's friends from growing up, would you stand up? All right. There comes yeah, okay. So, thank you all for being here, but look around at all these folks that don't know Haley and that get to know you now. Y'all can be seated now. Thank you for indulging us in that. So afterwards, let me just put this plug in as well. If you happen to smell garlic bread and spaghetti, it's because there is a lunch right over here afterwards that you are invited to stay for. The lunch is free. You can eat the lunch and enjoy it and go home. But you can also give a contribution. Today's lunch is being sponsored by our mission development team. And the proceeds from today's lunch, all of the proceeds from today's lunch are going to help Haley toward this ministry that you're going to be hearing about as she shares this morning. So you're welcome to stay. If you can't stay for lunch, but you would like to still help Haley out when it comes to this ministry, there is a basket over there that you can put any donation toward that in. And so let's just, one more time, or for the first time, I guess, even though some of y'all have already clapped, why don't you just give Haley a warm welcome home.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, I thought I was going to shake the nerves off the first service, but that is clearly not the case. So before I get started and introduce myself to some of you and give everybody a little bit of background, I want to say some thank yous. And so first I want to thank the church for having me. And I want to thank the mission development team for having the lunch and the generous donation they've already given to my ministry. And I want to thank Mill Creek just for loving me since I've been born. And so I also want to thank Danny. Like Danny said, we had talked maybe a little hi and bye in passing, and then I called him up over the summer. I was like, I need to talk to you. And he was like, okay. And he drove up to Lexington, and we had lunch, and he's been helping me ever since. So I think this church needs to realize just how lucky we are to have Danny. And I want to give one final thank you, obviously, to all of my friends and family who have driven in to see me, but I also want to thank the person who's probably influenced me the most in my Christian walk, and that would be J.R. Grable, my former youth pastor. I would not be here without J.R. And his love and support, so I just want to thank him. Okay, so for those of you that don't don't know me, my name is Haley Shotwell. I have been going to Mill Creek since I was born. I went to preschool at Mill Creek, and in the next picture you can see how thrilled I was to graduate from Mill Creek. And ever since then, Botetourt born and bred. I went to CAMS. I graduated from James River in 2011. And during that time, I made the decision in 6th grade at Eagle Eyrie on a weekend retreat to give my life to Christ. And I'll never forget that day. It was so exciting. All my friends were there, and we were in like a hall like this. And the speaker was like, okay, now everyone bow your heads, and we're going to say a prayer. And if anyone has made a decision to accept Jesus, walk to the back. We'll take you out to a room, and we'll pray with you, and all that good stuff. And so I got up and I walked to the back, and after they brought us back in, and they ended the service or whatever, and all my friends ran up to me. They were like, "Hey, we're so excited for you. This is awesome." And I was like, "Well, you're supposed to have your head down and your eyes closed." And Mary Beth Marshall, who's sitting here today, was like, "Yeah, I peeked and looked at your shoes." So that was awesome. And it's been like that ever since. My friends have been just absolutely amazing in my walk, and have strengthened me and just held me up. And I also wouldn't be here without them, and just the amazing people God's put in my life. So again, graduated from James River in 2011, and throughout my time in middle school and high school, I was very involved in FCA, which is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And along with that, went on a bunch of mission trips like you saw up there. Went to a bunch of weekend retreats, and really strengthened my faith through those things. And with FCA, we did a lot of breakfasts at North Star. That's a hard sell, right? So I knew all about FCA. I played a lot of sports growing up, about 13 years of travel softball, which unfortunately took me away from church a lot, but I still loved coming here on Wednesday nights. Wednesday nights were like my favorite because I got to see all my friends, and we didn't even do anything special. I said earlier, we played basketball and ate sausage pinwheels and just joked around. Like we weren't doing a whole lot, but we were fellowshipping together and being together and sharing in God's love. So then I went to Radford University, and I graduated from there in 2015. And while I was at Radford, I didn't find another church. I just would come back here because Mill Creek's home. And I just, as close as it is, it didn't feel necessary to go anywhere else. So after graduating from Radford, I accepted a job in the Citadel Athletic Department in Charleston, South Carolina. I know, tough gig. Somebody has to live there, though. And after 2 years at the Citadel, I moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina, because I worked with the Southern Conference, which is the athletic conference that the Citadel and BMI are in. And after 3 years with the Southern Conference, I got a call and was offered a job to work in the BMI athletic department. And to be completely honest, I didn't want to take the job. I didn't want to move back home just yet. I was enjoying exploring places other than Botetourt County, but it was too good to be true. So I took the job and I moved back home. So last spring, I really started to feel unsettled in my job. I wasn't really happy. I was burnt out, and I just needed a change. And so I prayed a lot about, God, what's the next step? And so one of my friends, who's here today, that I work with at BMI, invited me to go to an FCA breakfast that Al Soltis, who's also here today, that some of you might know, was hosting. And so I went to the breakfast, and Al was talking, and he flashed up a slide on the PowerPoint, and it talked about the people that worked under him. And so I didn't really think much on other than, wow, Al obviously needs a lot of help, and he needs all these people under him because he's running around, doing all of these huddles and everything. So a month later, 2 of my friends invited me to The Well, which, if you don't know what The Well is, it is an all-women's group that meets in downtown Roanoke like once a month. And this time when I went, it just so happened that Melissa Gayona was speaking. And I don't know if any of you all have ever heard her speak, but she is powerful. And while she was speaking, I don't know how to describe it other than it was just a vision in my head. And all I could see was the slide that Al had flashed up, and the position underneath him that he, was hoping to fill. And so I drove back to Lexington that night in complete silence, the full hour, which is so unlike me. Typically I have to have background noise, because I didn't really know what to think. And I went to sleep and I was like, okay, whatever. So that next week, the following week, it just continued to show up in my head. And I probably rank in God's top 5 slowest runners he's ever put on this earth. But I ran as fast as possible from that calling. I was like, this is not for me. This is not for me. I don't want to do this. Until finally, it was so much that I went and talked to this same friend of mine. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And she was like, you need to go talk to Al. So I go and talk to Al, and he's thrilled. He's like, absolutely, we can definitely make this happen. Like, we will get you on staff here. Like, let me know. Well, in the process of trying to run from this calling, I have been applying for tons of jobs. I had interviewed for a job at William & Mary, was a finalist and did not get it. It was just kind of like, okay, whatever. But then I got a call about what I would call my dream job. And that was working with the NCAA, which is like the mecca of all sports, in Indianapolis. And it would be doing what I enjoy the most, which is like social media type things, interacting with fans, just promoting all of these sports. I'm going to be going to national championships. Like, it is the dream job. And so I go and I interview. And a couple days later, they call me, and they're like, yeah, the job's yours. Like, if you want it, it's yours. I was like, great. Because I was not excited. I was not excited at all. Even when I was up there and seeing everything, I just wasn't excited, and I knew I should have been. And so, soon after getting that call, I was talking with my friend Emily, and we were going through the pros and cons of what should I do here, and listing them for each job. And after going at this for a while, we just kind of like stopped, and she was like, do you feel like you're running from a calling? And I burst into tears, and just immediately, peace came over me. And I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And if it wasn't 11 o'clock, I would have called Al right then and said, hey, I'm joining the team. And I would have called the NCAA and turned it down. But instead I called my family and said, hey guys, listen to this, because you're going to think I'm crazy. And my family was just fantastic about it, and so on board with it. But it was just, as soon as that question was asked, that's when I knew what I had to do. So after talking to Al, and Al's like, okay, like, you're going to have to do public speaking, you're going to have to work with like cadet athletes, you're going to have to fundraise for your salary. And I was like, great, absolutely, like, let's do it. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, oh no. Because in this role, I will be working with all of the women athletes at VMI, and leading huddles, devotions, trying to work with coaches and administrators as well, and just try and show everyone the light of God. So I think something that's really important for me in all of it, since I've been born, is to look back at what God has been doing in my life to weave the pieces together to set me up for this. So in that fellowship hall right over there, when I was extremely young, my wonderful grandmother, Titi, used to volunteer me to say the blessing every Wednesday night meal. Now funnily enough, everyone who came up to me after the early service was like, wow, you used to be so like shy and quiet. And I was like, yeah, I know, right? But anyway, so she would volunteer me for the Wednesday night blessing. And I think the reason I remember that is because I got like a little toy at the end of the year for doing it, so that's probably in my mind. But that's like, God showing me that I'm going to have to do public speaking and talking about my faith, even when I was so young. Another thing I remember is we had a youth Sunday. I think I was in high school, maybe middle school, and JR told me at the time, he was like, you're going to do the mission development part of it. And I was like, but that's the only part that doesn't have a script. Like, I have to make that up. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, great. So I did that. So nervous. And then another part that I've seen God kind of weave pieces together is the job at BMI. I had to sell corporate sponsorships. Now, if there is another person in the room and a pizza needs to be ordered, I will make the other person call. I do not want to talk to other people. I do not want to ask them for money. Like, that's just not what I want to do. But that job made me call and be like, hey, you should give some money to BMI for this reason. And so that got me out of my comfort zone and made me, or prepared me for this FCA role. And I think lastly, one of the things that God has really done in my life recently is really made me stop and think before I make a decision. I think a lot of times I would just kind of be like, oh yeah, this feels right, I'll do this. But now I stop and think like, okay, God, is this part of your will for my life? So, I won't lie, this year has been probably the toughest spiritually for me, which Danny says is a good thing because it means the devil's coming after you. But it's been nice to see the little reminders God puts in my way every day as like no, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And one of those was recently. The FCA board, along with me and Al, are doing the Mark Batterson Draw the Circle Prayer Challenge, which I think the church has done before. And day 20 reads, you'll never be ready. You'll never be ready to start a business or go back to school or move to the mission field. You'll never be ready financially, emotionally, or spiritually. You'll never have enough faith, enough cash, or enough courage. And if you're looking for an excuse, you will always find one. If you wait until you're ready, you'll be waiting for the rest of your life. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And that last line really got me. Because this past week, every Monday we have a post-wide huddle where anybody on BMI's campus can come to this quick 45-minute huddle. And this one cadet athlete basically quoted the entire book of Job. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can quote John 3:16. I do not know the Bible. I'm just not good with that stuff. And that's something I certainly want to get better at, but it's not who I am. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, how am I supposed to be leading these kids when they're, so much better at this stuff than me? But then I read that little line, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And I'm like, okay, all right, I guess I'll, let it go for now, God. And to that same point, I've been trying to read more of the Bible lately. And I came across Psalm 16:3, which says, how excellent are the Lord's faithful people. My greatest pleasure is to be with them. And this verse stuck out to me because I realized how uplifted and happy I am when I'm at church and around these people. And I'm like, wow, I get to do that all the time now. Like, I get to be around these cadet athletes who just have a heart for God. And that's just like awesome because now that's my full-time job. And then another cadet said this past Monday, which really hit me hard. It said, faith ends when anxiety begins. Which is, really hard for someone like me who worries about the sun coming up. So it's been difficult trying to turn things over to God and be like, okay, this is going to be very much outside of my comfort zone. But this is what you want me to do, God. So I'll do it. And then lastly, I read this verse just recently, and it's John 16:33. I have told you this, that you will have peace by being united to me. The world will make you suffer, but be brave. I have defeated the world. And so why do I need to worry about the sun coming up when our God has already defeated the world? So I want to, again, that's kind of my testimony and how I ended up here, but I also want to talk about Mill Creek. The building and the people may change, but Mill Creek is a powerful place. I know Al and I get caught up in the numbers a lot, like, oh, we only had 10 people at a huddle or whatever, but it doesn't matter, because what matters is how you're affecting the people and who you're affecting. And I think it's fantastic that Mill Creek still does the mission trips in the Dominican Republic and all over these places. But Mill Creek has such a profound, the effect they have on the community is amazing. People know who Mill Creek is. And you're influencing people like me who have been here for forever. And again, it's not like the youth group was just doing all this amazing stuff. We were just fellowshipping down in the youth room and just having a good time. And so I want to read some lyrics from one of my favorite songs right now, and it's called Old Church Basement. And it says, "We got together every Wednesday night, about 30 teenagers. My friend Josh bought a cheap guitar and barely knew how to play it. He wasn't putting on a show, wasn't well known, wasn't trying to be famous, but we sure touched heaven in that old church basement. And these friendships that I've created at Mill Creek have spanned a lifetime. I mean, I think one of the pictures shows that's a reunion we had in college where JR just got us all together and we just had dinner. And that's all it takes. And now all my friends are here to see me today, which just means so much. And then the next picture shows us at a wedding this past summer. I mean, these friendships have lasted forever. And it's because God put them in my life for that reason. So, to conclude, and I talked fast again, sorry, Danny. I want to thank Mill Creek for loving me, for supporting me. You know, when I called Danny and said, hey, I really feel like this has been laid on my heart to come and speak at Mill Creek. Can you let me do this? He was like, yeah, absolutely. Why do you feel like that? And I was like, oh, because they love me. They'll be guinea pigs for when I start speaking. But I want to thank Mill Creek for continuing to pour into the community as a whole, and the future generations as well. You know, I used to sit in what I called big church in the sanctuary and think like, oh my gosh, I could never sit up there, I could never talk up there, or you know, whatever. And now here I am. And so you're impacting the youth of today, the youth of the past, and just spreading God's light, which is what it's all about. So thank you all for allowing me to be here today.